My name is Eliza Quinn, and I was the one who stayed. For 3 long years, I bathed my father, managed his medications, coaxed him to eat when his appetite vanished, and cleaned up after him when his pride wouldn't let him call for help in time. I did it because I loved him, because I couldn't bear to see him alone in that condition. My sister, Dana, visited once a month, maybe. She'd bring a bottle of wine and talk about her crazy work schedule while I silently folded Dad's laundry in the background. Dad had Alzheimer's. Watching someone you love forget the core of who they are, it's not just heartbreaking. It's brutal. Some days he thought I was Mom. Some days he thought I was 12 again. And some days he didn't know me at all. But I never walked away. I quit my job as a school counselor when it got too hard to juggle everything. I moved into Dad's house, the house we grew up in, because he couldn't be alone anymore. I took over the bills, the appointments, the late-night emergencies. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't date. I didn't have a life outside those 4 walls for 3 whole years. And I didn't resent him. Not really. I missed him, the version of him before the disease, the dad who made pancakes on Sunday mornings and taught me how to change a tire in the driveway. That version of him flickered in and out, like a dimming light bulb, and I held on to every spark. Dana and I were never close, even before everything. She was always the golden child, charismatic, charming, effortlessly impressive. The kind of person who could show up late, unprepared, and still get praised. I was the quiet one, the planner, the fixer. So when Dad passed away last month, I thought maybe, just maybe, all those years of care and sacrifice would mean something. The funeral was small. Quiet. Just the way Dad would have wanted. Dana showed up in a designer dress and oversized sunglasses, crying harder than anyone, even though she hadn't seen him in over a month. People whispered about how devoted she must have been. I kept my head down and made sure the food trays were full and the guests had tissues. Then came the will reading. I sat in the lawyer's office, my heart pounding in my chest, half hopeful, half dreading what I might hear. Dana strolled in 10 minutes late, sipping an iced latte and chatting with the paralegal like it was a casual business meeting. Mr. Harrow, Dad's lawyer for decades, opened a thick folder and adjusted his glasses. I have here the last will and testament of Mr. Thomas Quinn, updated 6 months ago. 6 months. That stung. I remembered the day he had insisted on going into town alone, claiming he needed to feel independent. I'd let him. I figured he was going to buy candy like he always did. Thomas Quinn, being of sound mind, the will began. My stomach twisted. He left everything, to Dana. The house, the car, his savings, the pension, the tiny lake cabin we used to visit every summer. All of it. Not a single mention of me, not even a thank you for being his caregiver. I couldn't breathe. Dana let out a dramatic gasp, covering her mouth like she'd just been hit with a wave of grief. Oh my God, she whispered. I didn't expect this. Liar. Mr. Harrow continued reading, his voice steady, emotionless, unaware, or maybe pretending not to notice, how I'd gone completely numb. I felt like I was watching my own life from outside my body. Like someone had hit pause and I was stuck in a moment that made no sense. How could he? I whispered, barely loud enough to hear myself. Dana turned to me, all wide-eyed sympathy. Eliza. I didn't know. I had no idea he was going to do this. I stared at her, rage simmering beneath the surface. Of course she knew. She'd convinced him. Manipulated him. She'd shown up with her fake smiles and sweet words and planted the idea that she was the one who deserved it all. And he believed her. Or maybe he just forgot. Maybe, in his mind, she was still the daughter who called every day and helped out and cared. While I was just the ghost in the hallway. I left the office without saying a word. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred. I got into my car and sat there, staring at the steering wheel. I'd given up everything for him. And in the end, it was like I hadn't existed. I didn't even have enough gas in the tank to make it home without stopping. I spent the next few days in a haze. Grief, betrayal, exhaustion, they all melted into one long, aching blur. I went through the motions, making meals I barely ate, wandering around the house where every object reminded me of him. His slippers still sat by the back door. His glasses were on the nightstand. I couldn't even bring myself to move them. Dana didn't call. Not once. Not even to pretend like she felt bad. Then, on the 5th day, I got a call from Mr. Harrow. "Eliza," he said, his voice tight, "I need to apologize. There was an error in the documents." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "There was a letter. A handwritten one from your father, meant to be delivered to you after the will reading. It was misplaced in our files. I found it this morning." He emailed me a scanned copy. I opened it on my laptop, my fingers trembling. "Dear Eliza, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I don't know what my mind will be like when that happens, but I hope you know, even if I couldn't say it at the end, how much I love you. I know what you've given up for me. I see it even when I forget your name. I feel it in the way you guide me through my fog. You were my anchor when the tide pulled me out too far. I wish I could make that up to you. But I also know Dana. She'll expect everything. She'll pressure me, charm me, guilt me. And the truth is, I don't have the fight in me anymore. I've made a decision I regret, and I can't fix it now without hurting everyone. So here's what I want you to know. The will may say one thing, but my heart says another. I trust you. I believe in you. And if I could go back, I'd leave it all to you, with a note that simply says, thank you for loving me when I was unlovable. Don't let this destroy you. Build your life. Be free. You've earned it. Love always. Dad. I broke down right there, the sobs coming so hard I couldn't breathe. He knew. He really knew. And still, he'd given Dana everything. I didn't know how to feel. The letter meant everything, but it also changed nothing. Legally, Dana owned it all. The house. The cabin. Even the damn photo albums. A week later, I asked to meet her. I chose a public place, a small cafe near downtown, because I knew if I didn't have a table between us, I might lose control. She showed up in a sleek blazer, sunglasses perched on her head like she was heading to a fashion shoot. Eliza, she said, sitting across from me with that infuriating smirk. You look tired. I am, I said flatly. 3 years of caregiving will do that. She gave a little chuckle, like I'd made a joke. I got Dad's letter, I said. That wiped the smile right off her face. Oh. Yeah. The one he wrote me, the one your charm campaign couldn't erase. She leaned back, her fingers curling around her coffee cup. Well, that's sweet. But the will is still the will. I'm not contesting it, I said. I just want you to understand what you did. You came in at the end, made a few appearances, whispered in his ear when his mind was slipping, and took advantage. Her eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, I said, my voice low. It's the truth. But I'm not here to fight you. I just needed to say it to your face. For a second, she looked almost human. Then she said, you always did like playing the martyr. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and looked down at her one last time. I wasn't playing. I was the martyr. But not anymore. I left without looking back. Back at Dad's house, I started packing. I couldn't stay there, not in the place I once called home but now felt like a monument to betrayal. Every hallway echoed with what I'd lost. But I also knew this: I had nothing left to give to that house, to Dana, to anyone who didn't see my worth. So I sold the only thing I still owned, Dad's old pickup, in my name, and used the money for a down payment on a tiny apartment 3 towns over. It wasn't much. But it was mine. I moved into the new apartment at the start of April. It was small, just 2 rooms and a kitchenette, but it was the first place I'd lived in that didn't feel borrowed or temporary. There was something about setting down a coffee mug on a counter I'd paid for that gave me a strange sense of peace. Like I'd reclaimed some tiny piece of dignity. I tried not to think about the will. Or Dana. Or the fact that the house I'd spent the last 3 years pouring myself into now belonged to someone who didn't lift a finger for Dad. But grief is funny like that, it sneaks in through cracks. A song, a smell, a memory. I'd be folding laundry and suddenly remember the way Dad used to hum Sinatra in the mornings, or how he'd call me kiddo even when he couldn't remember my name. Those memories didn't just sting, they gutted me. One night, I found myself flipping through an old notebook I'd used to track Dad's meds and appointments. Pages full of dosage charts, doctor's notes, little reminders like ask about his dizziness or he smiled when we played the jazz record. I hadn't meant to keep it, but now I couldn't throw it away. It was proof that I'd been there. That I mattered. About 2 weeks after I settled into the new place, I got a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my stomach turned when I saw Dana standing there, holding a cardboard box. I thought I'd drop this off, she said, stepping past me without waiting to be invited. Found it in the attic, said Eliza on the side. I stood frozen in the doorway for a second before closing it quietly behind her. You went through the attic? Well, yeah. I live there now. It's my house, remember? Of course. She set the box down on the counter, brushing dust off her sleeves like it personally offended her. Anyway, I figured you'd want it. It looked like old stuff, letters, maybe. Photos. She said it like it was a generous act, like she hadn't stolen the rest of my life out from under me. Thanks, I said, though it tasted bitter on my tongue. She glanced around my apartment, eyes lingering on the second-hand couch and the tiny kitchenette. It's cozy. I didn't respond. She tapped her nails on the counter. Listen, she said finally, I didn't come here to argue. That'd be a first. She sighed. I came because I wanted you to know I'm selling the house. My heart skipped. What? The taxes are ridiculous, and it needs work. I'm not keeping it. Thought you should know. I stared at her. That house was our family's. You could've. What? Let you live there for free? Eliza, come on. You don't think I know what this is really about? I crossed my arms. Enlighten me. You hate that he picked me. That he gave it all to me, even after you played nursemaid for years. Don't you dare. I didn't force him, Eliza. I didn't lie. Maybe he just liked me more. There it was. The truth, finally out of her mouth. Not a slip, not a misunderstanding. Just cruelty. I hope selling the house gives you exactly what you want, I said, my voice cold. She shrugged. It will. She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her like a period at the end of a sentence I didn't want to read. I turned to the box. Inside were dozens of old photos. Some of me and Dana as kids. Some of Mom, before she got sick. And some of Dad, holding me in his arms, laughing like the world hadn't yet touched us. Beneath the photos was a manila envelope. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a note, written in Dad's uneven handwriting. To my girls. If you ever find this, I hope you'll remember the good. The backyard barbecues, the road trips, the way your mom used to sing in the kitchen. I hope you'll remember each other, even if you're angry. Life's too short to stay mad. I don't know what I'll forget, or what I've already forgotten. But I hope you both remember this: I loved you. Both of you. All the way to the end. Dad. I sat on the floor and cried for the first time in weeks. Not because of the betrayal. Not because of the will. But because, in that moment, I remembered the sound of his laugh. And it didn't hurt. After Dana's visit, something shifted. I couldn't explain it at first, just this strange restlessness that curled itself around my ribs. The kind that makes you clean your apartment at midnight or reread old letters looking for something you missed. I didn't want to admit it, but her words stuck with me. Maybe he just liked me more. Was that true? Had Dad really looked at Dana, the daughter who barely showed up, and still believed she was the one who deserved it all? I started having dreams. Always the same. I'd walk into the kitchen, and he'd be sitting at the table, wearing his old plaid robe, sipping coffee from the chipped mug he'd had since I was a kid. I'd try to talk, but he'd just smile like he didn't recognize me. Then I'd wake up with that hollow ache lodged deep in my chest. It didn't help that everyone around me seemed to have moved on. People stopped calling after the funeral. The casseroles stopped showing up. My grief had an expiration date, apparently, and it had come and gone. So I distracted myself the only way I knew how, by working. I got a part-time job at the library downtown. It didn't pay much, but the quiet helped. There was comfort in the routine, in alphabetizing shelves and stamping return dates. I'd stay late some nights just to avoid going home to the silence. One night, I was reorganizing the biography section when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned, and there he was, Mr. Callahan, Dad's old neighbor. "Eliza," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "Heard you were working here." I smiled politely. "Hi, Mr. Callahan." "Yeah, just a few nights a week." He looked at me for a long moment, then reached into his coat pocket. "I've been meaning to give you this." He handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it, confused, until I saw what it was. A receipt. For a cashier's check. Made out to Dana Quinn. For $50,000. My blood ran cold. "I don't understand," I said. Mr. Callahan scratched his head. "About 7 months ago, your dad came to me. Said he wanted to borrow some money for a family emergency. Said Dana was in trouble. I didn't ask questions, he was a good friend. He said he'd pay me back through the estate. But, I swallowed. He didn't leave anything to me." He nodded slowly. "I know. That's why I thought you should see this. I figured you'd want to know where some of that money went." I stared at the slip, my mind spinning. Dana had told Dad she was in some kind of trouble? And he'd borrowed money, his friend's money, to bail her out? And then she let me take care of him, knowing full well she'd already gotten her share. "I'm sorry if this causes problems," Mr. Callahan said gently. But it didn't sit right with me. "No," I said, my voice tight. "Thank you. I'm glad you showed me." He gave me a sad smile and left. I stood there for a long time, gripping the paper in my hand, the weight of it sinking in. All this time, I thought she got lucky at the will reading. But she'd started siphoning from him months before he died. The next morning, I made a call. Not to Dana. Not to a lawyer. To a reporter. Melissa Tate, from the local paper, had once interviewed me back when I worked at the high school. I remembered how gentle she was, how carefully she had told the story of our students' mental health program. She answered on the second ring. "Eliza Quinn," she said, her voice warm. "It's been a while." "I have a story," I said. "And I think people need to hear it." Melissa met me at the coffee shop near the library. She brought a notebook and a small recorder, but she didn't take them out right away. Instead, she just looked at me with those clear, kind eyes and said, "Start wherever it makes sense." I told her everything. How I'd quit my job to care for Dad. How Dana showed up only for appearances. The will reading. The letter Dad had written. And finally, the $50,000 cashier's check I'd discovered the night before. Melissa didn't interrupt once. She just listened, occasionally jotting something down in her notebook. When I was finished, I sat back, feeling like I'd just run a marathon barefoot. My throat was dry, my hands shaky, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I'd said something that mattered. "I'm not looking to destroy her," I said, almost apologetically. I want the truth out there." She nodded. "It's a powerful story. A quiet one, but powerful." That week, she published a piece called "The Daughter Who Stayed, A Caregiver's Quiet Fight for Recognition." She didn't name Dana directly. She didn't need to. The story wasn't about revenge, it was about love, sacrifice, and how easy it is for people like me to disappear behind the noise of more glamorous stories. It went local viral. Not huge, but enough. Teachers I used to work with messaged me. Old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. Even a few strangers sent notes to the library, saying things like "Thank you for speaking up" and "I see you." And then, because life has a strange sense of timing, Dana called. "Eliza," she said, her voice clipped. "Really? A public sob story?" "It's not a story," I said calmly. "It's my life. You made me look like a villain. You did that all by yourself." There was silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. "I know you're angry. But dragging this into the spotlight. You took $50,000 from him, Dana," I cut in. "Money he thought you needed for an emergency. And then you let me pick up the pieces for years while you played the grieving daughter. That money was..." She stopped herself, then sighed. "It was complicated. I had debts, okay? Real ones. But that's not the point." "No, Dana. That's exactly the point." She didn't respond right away. Then, in a voice that surprised me with its honesty, she said, "You don't understand what it's like to always be seen as the screw-up. To know that if I didn't charm my way through life, I'd be nothing." "I don't," I admitted. "But maybe you don't know what it's like to be invisible either. To do all the work and have no one notice." There was another long silence before she finally said, "I'm selling the house next week. The buyers are already lined up. But, if you want anything from it, come get it before Friday." I didn't say thank you. But I went. On Thursday morning, I pulled up to the house one last time. The garden was overgrown, the porch steps chipped. I walked through the rooms with a box tucked under my arm, not looking at the walls, just the spaces that still felt like him. I found his old jazz records. The deck of cards we used to play rummy with. And a small frame tucked behind some books in the study, one of the last photos of us, before the disease really took him. I didn't take much. Just enough to build a corner of my apartment that still felt like home. As I walked out, Dana stood by the door. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But when I reached my car, she called out softly. "He did love you, you know." I paused, turned halfway. "I know." Then I got in and drove away. The apartment felt warmer with the little pieces of him around. His old jazz records, the photo on the shelf, the familiar hum of his voice in my memory. It wasn't a full home, not yet, but it was something. A beginning. Melissa's article changed more than I expected. People began recognizing me at the library. Not in a celebrity way, more like a quiet nod, a softened tone in their voice when they checked out a book. One woman, probably in her 70s, slipped me a folded note on her way out. "I took care of my husband until the end." No one thanked me either. "Thank you for speaking up." I cried in the break room after that one. And then came the letter from Mr. Harrow again. Another mistake, he said. One he'd uncovered while reviewing the estate's tax filings for Dana's sale of the house. There's a small savings bond your father never updated, he said over the phone. It matured years ago and was never moved into the trust. Legally, it's still in his name, with you as the secondary beneficiary. I blinked. Wait, what does that mean? It means, he said, you're entitled to it. No one else. It wasn't much, just over $12,000. But to me, it felt like a lighthouse in fog. Like a whisper from Dad saying, I didn't forget you entirely. I used it to enroll in a part-time counseling program. Going back to school felt right. Helping others, kids, especially, navigate the mess of their emotions felt like the thing I'd always been meant to do. Maybe I couldn't undo what happened, but I could build something out of the rubble. In class one evening, we were discussing anticipatory grief, the kind that creeps in when you know someone's going to die but still hope they won't. I sat there, biting the inside of my cheek, thinking about the months when Dad started slipping. How I kept hoping the next day would be better. How I never really prepared for the fact that goodbye wouldn't feel like an event. It would feel like 1,000 little fractures. After class, one of the younger students, a girl named Tasha, caught up to me outside. She was quiet, always sat in the back. I read that article, she said. The one about you and your dad. I was surprised. You did? She nodded. My grandma raised me. She's fading now, and I moved back home to take care of her. Everyone keeps calling me strong, but mostly I just feel tired. I smiled, heart aching in that familiar way. It's okay to be tired. Strong and tired aren't opposites. We talked for a while. And for the first time since the will reading, I felt useful. Like everything I'd lived through wasn't just pain, it was something I could hand off to someone else, like a torch. A few weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a card, plain and white, with one sentence in careful handwriting. You were the one who stayed. I know what that's worth now. There was no signature. But I didn't need one. 1 year after Dad passed, I stood at the edge of the lake by the old cabin, now someone else's property, sold off like the rest. I wasn't supposed to be there. The new owners had been gracious enough to let me visit once, after Melissa's article. Just for closure, they said kindly. And I came alone, with a small thermos of coffee and that old photo in my jacket pocket, the one where he had his arm around me, grinning like he didn't have a care in the world. The trees were beginning to turn, gold and rust-colored leaves skipping across the water. Dad loved this place. It was where he taught me to fish. Where he once told me he hoped I'd grow up strong, but also soft enough to still care. I sat on the dock and pulled the photo from my pocket, running my thumb across the edges. Hey, Dad, I said aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm okay. And I was. Not healed, not completely, but okay in the way a tree keeps growing around a scar in its trunk. Stronger in the places that were once broken. Dana and I hadn't spoken since the letter. I hadn't tried to track her down, and she hadn't tried either. But that anonymous card, the one I found in the mailbox weeks ago, I kept it. Tucked in my desk drawer, reread more times than I'd admit. I didn't know if she wrote it. I didn't know if she ever would say the words aloud. But it was enough. Back in the city, the counseling program kept me grounded. I started working with young caregivers, teens taking care of sick parents or grandparents, often without anyone really seeing them. I saw myself in them, over and over. One day, a girl named Marisol, barely 16, caring for her mother with MS, told me, I don't think people understand what this does to you. You grow up so fast, and then it's like, no one's even watching. I looked her in the eyes and said, I know. But I see you. She nodded, quietly, and I knew that in some small way, I was giving back what I never got. Some evenings I still dream of Dad, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost. In one, he called me kiddo and asked me to drive us home. I told him I didn't know the way, and he smiled and said, "You'll figure it out." I woke up crying. But not the kind of cry that left me hollow. The kind that made room. I don't know what Dad truly intended with that will. I don't know if Dana really lied or if he just forgot. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Because in the end, the legacy I needed wasn't money or property. It was knowing I showed up. I stayed when it was hard. I did the right thing, even when it cost me everything. And now, I have something no one can take from me. Peace. And maybe that's all I ever really needed.